By the looks of this picture, you're probably thinking, yep, that was the worst kept secret in the automotive world. If there was a new Tundra, you knew there was going to be a new Sikoya. But actually, it wasn't guaranteed. So you and I need to cover exactly what the hell this thing is and how it came to be. So let's start with name, rank, and serial number. A couple of months ago in San Antonio, Texas, you and I drove the all-new Tundra. That introduced a completely new box frame for a body-on-frame vehicle. In that case, it was a pickup truck. It shares the platform with the Toyota Land Cruiser. But as we've discussed, there is no Land Cruiser that is coming to the US. However, there is a Lexus LS600 that comes in its place. We can discuss that in many other episodes. So how does all that map to this vehicle? Well, let's start with what's underneath the hood, and this, you will not be surprised to learn, is a twin turbocharged 3.5 V6, 437 horsepower, and 583 pounds of torque. Now, this is a system that is not the usual two electric motor parallel hybrid like a Prius. This is a system closer to the AMG system from the Mercedes, where there's a, they don't call it an integrated starter generator motor. Mark Swears, the chief engineer, he kind of yelled at me about that. It's a motor generator, and it sits between the engine and the transmission, and it can be either all EV mode or provide extra torque. The thing they were going for was a flat diesel curve with power coming out of a 3.5 twin turbocharged V6. Now, in the Tundra, we learned that it's 24 on the highway, 22 combined. Don't have EPA estimates for this vehicle here. Now, the rest of it is all kind of the same as well. You and I are going to have a discussion with Mike Squeers in a couple of weeks where he kind of gives us the behind the scenes of this vehicle. Now, towards the end of this episode, I'll paraphrase Mike's story of how this almost didn't come to be. Now, back to the actual platform itself, or really in this case, the box frame. Think of this as like a body-on-frame, like a Tahoe Suburban, an Expedition, stuff like that. Come on over here, Scott. We could talk more about the suspension up front. This is an independent suspension in the front. In the rear, it's a multi-link, but not independent. Now, this one here is the very fancy Capstone. This is the one that's going to be crazy expensive. My guess is north of like 75, almost 80 grand. So this one has an air ride. We'll look at a TRD Pro that has a different suspension over there. And following into our theme of the worst kept secret in the automotive industry, this should look all very familiar to you. This is directly from the Tundra, which is to say a good thing. All of the tactile feel, the fit and finish, color and trim, some of the stuff we saw in the Tundra a couple of months ago, that is carried on to this one. Again, this one is the Capstone, so it has the semi-aniline leather. Now, what does that mean to you and I? That is the same grade of leather that's in a Lexus LS500. The most important thing that tracks from the Tundra over to this is the UX. I can't turn this car on because it's a prototype and it's literally held together by chewing gum and spit, but it's the same 14-inch screen that works with the new UX that's cascading through the Toyota and Lexus environment. Now going to the back, because that's really the business end of this thing. This one, once again, is one of the fancy models. So this has the captain's chairs. There is a bench that is on offer in the most basic model. And we have to talk about what basic means in this vehicle, because there isn't going to be, at least for now, a 3.5 twin turbo V6 without the hybrid. You only get this in the hybrid version. Now back to name, rank, and serial number. We need to discuss some important figures, which sadly I do not have. The wheelbase and the length of the vehicle is still very early in this generation introduction cycle. Toyota has yet to share those details with me, but suffice it to say there's plenty of room back here, especially in these captain seats. And down here there are some controls in terms of HVAC, heated seat, even cooled seats in the back. That's pretty fancy. Now, because I love you guys and you like to see me torture myself, I'm going to try to shoehorn myself in those seats back here. Maybe Scott could come and film the torture as I go back here. Ugh. It's not terrible. And this is the reason why people buy vehicles like this. Full-size SUVs, you can actually put an adult or a teenager back here without severing their legs. So this is really something that is, I would say, comfortable, but something about this is different, and for there we have to go to the back. Okay, so here we come to the business end of a Sikoya and what makes it a Sikoya, this being a large three-row SUV. and hopefully this will work. Once again, this is a very early pre-production prototype. Thankfully, that did work. There's a couple of things going on back here. Not really new in terms of the world of large SUVs. You can move the seats. In this case, it's the third row seats that can go forward and backward, and this is a 60-40 split, so I can put the seats down. But something interesting about this is there's a shelf system. So let's say for the sake of discussion, I want to make a flat floor when I fold the seats. Let's see if we can actually do this. Okay, so it's actually working. The seat goes down. Granted, it does take some time because it's a power fold seat. Me personally, I never understood power fold seats. Maybe when you got a lot of stuff in your hands, you kind of need it. But you see the height with the seat in it is higher than the shelf here, or really higher than this little bin here. So the idea is you have a shelf system, if I get this thing correct, where I can match a flat load floor with the third seat as well as the second row seat. Now this is the one set up with the captain's chairs. It goes completely flat with the bench from what I understand, but we'll have to understand that when we drive the vehicle. And then there's another party trick here. There's a third level of shelf, if I can get this thing in here. Yep, do that. And then if I close this, a lot of electric going on here. Now there's a release here, and voila, one can access the higher shelf. So if I go to the grocery store, I can put my stuff here, and it isn't like a Turkish bazaar of stuff floating around. Now we understand the practicality. Let's get into the design. This is a thing I kind of expected. I expected this thing to look like a new Tundra, just with a station wagon body. But here's where I'm kind of surprised. I actually like the design of this thing, and I am not a practical human being. You know me, if something is not a 911 or a Lotus Elise, I don't like it. This, I think, is more attractive than some of the other vehicles, definitely more attractive than the Ford. I'd say somewhat on par with what GM is doing. We will discuss that more in future episodes. Then look at this one. It's the fancy capstone, which we discussed, but what does that mean? We talked about the interior, but exterior, it changes the grille. Scott, let's take a look at the grille here. Notice it's not fancy chrome, it's more kind of understated, which is kind of my speed. This is more of like a satin finish aluminum. And then the wheels, 22-inch wheels on a Toyota SUV. I guess, you know, that's kind of a new frontier. It's not just this one getting it, it's also the capstone pickup, and you and I are going to be doing a capstone pickup episode with the deposed leader of the Buhanka Freedom Party, that is Andre from TFL Car, and he's going to go like on a deep dive of the pickup with you guys, I think in about a week. Then we have to press on to really, I think, what is the star of the show, and that would be something that is not as fancy as this. And you knew it had to be the TRD Off-Road Edition. Now this, it's a lot of the same bits that make the TRD Off-Road Edition of the Tundra. Let's start with underneath the vehicle, and that would be the 18-inch wheels, which are BBS. I gotta say, it makes the thing look much cooler, even though the 22s do look pretty interesting. It changes the tire, so it's I think it's a 33-inch tire. And then most importantly, maybe Scott can come in here and get the shot of the shocks here. It's the same Fox off-road shocks with the overflow reservoir, and then they have the cool red anti-roll bar and the skid plate. Then this one has, I believe this one is fitted as an accessory. This is the overall step to get you into the vehicle. It's not a power step like they have in the capstone in the pickup truck, and then a fancy roof rack. And then I gotta tell you, the design folks at Kelty, they had more fun with this vehicle than they have with other vehicles, because, I mean, let's be honest, they make Camrys, they make Corollas, things that are basically appliances. So this, it's got some texture to it. It looks pretty cool. That same texture is repeated on the seats, and then in a heritage touch from Toyota back in the day, and I know most people don't think of Toyota as heritage, this is a very old company, been in the US, what, 70 years. This logo here on the dashboard, as well as, let's take a look in the front, on this grille, which is different from the capstone, it's the heritage logo from the original Yo machines like back in the 70s. And then you got some lights here, and then marker lights over here. Now that we understand that we have a TRD off-road, I do want to give you guys a bit of a preview of what's coming. Kevin, can you come join me on camera here? So we got very lucky because Kevin, this is the man that runs Toyota Design in North America. He's worked there for like 80 years, no exaggeration. I will have him on camera talking about this as well as the Tundra, and I believe something about LC500s. Is that correct?
If you like.
Okay, so we're going to talk to him, but in the interim, it's time to turn the episode around to you guys to comment, or via our social media, they can comment about the design. Do you want to hear about the design from these guys?
I do. I'd love to hear about
See if they like it or don't
yeah,
like it.
let's do it.
I'm going to throw another question out to these guys. Do they think this is truly competitive with a Tahoe and a Yukon? Because I think that's the target, although you disagree with me, and you will find out that in the next episode. Oh, and I promised one more thing. This almost didn't come to be. Mike Swears, who is the chief engineer of this vehicle, he actually had to go and sell the concept of a Sikoya to like the Grand High Council of Toyota, because they weren't completely sold on the idea of a Sikoya. So he basically had to do some interesting like Long Island horse trading, which he will talk about also in a future episode. Till we see you then, bis später.